Good morning, Øredev. How's everyone doing out there? So, it's always lovely to be back here. I think this is the, 8th, 9th time that I've been in Malmö because there's a bunch of different events happen here. And there's a funny story I always like to start with when I'm presenting in Sweden, because my first trip here, which was about 7 or 8 years ago, someone gave me a mug, like a little thank you very much for speaking at our event. And I had no idea what the inscription on the mug said, but it's quite a nice mug, so I took it home and I was drinking coffee out of it. And it's got a line from a Carlson on the roof. It's, Jag är en vacker och genomklok och lagom tjock man I mina bästa år. And I have no idea what this means, so I'm happily drinking coffee, and I'm on Zoom with one of my friends a few years back, and she says to me, do you know what that means? I'm like, no. And she says, it means I'm a handsome, wise, and perfectly plump man living my best years. And I thought, all right, I can work with that. So yes, good morning, I'm Dylan, and I'm going to tell you a story about the dumbest thing I ever did in .NET. I'm going to tell you a story about a joke that got so completely out of hand that the joke has a reference implementation and a test suite. And the joke starts here. The joke starts with for a large part of my career, you could go online and you could find companies on LinkedIn and IT Jobs and everyone trying to hire something called a Rockstar programmer or a Rockstar senior front-end or a Rockstar JavaScript or a Rockstar senior Java software developer. Now, this was absolutely rife about 10 years ago. And of course, there is no such thing as a Rockstar programmer. Well, there wasn't such a thing as a Rockstar programmer. There was this idea that you had these teams of people who they all hate each other, they all hate their boss, they're all stuck using PHP version 2 forever, and they think if they hire the right person, it'll solve all the problems. No, that's not how any of this works. But this idea of companies going, oh, we need a Rockstar programmer, it just kind of would not go away. And then in 2018, Paul Stovell put this on Twitter. To really confuse recruiters, somebody should make a programming language called Rockstar. Now, this gave me an idea, because I misspent my youth in 2 different ways. I spent half of it playing with computers and figuring out how to write programs and build web pages and all that kind of stuff. And I spent the other half under the influence of these fine people, and I thought, that's what we should do. We should make a language called Rockstar, which allows you to write programs that look like bad heavy metal songs from the 1980s. That's clearly what the world needs. And of course, when you see a thing that says someone should make a programming language called Rockstar. Now, let me tell you the story of what happened next. So it's 2018, and I have just seen this, and about 20 years worth of listening to rock and metal music and playing around with programming and esoteric languages and language construction are all sort of bubbling away in the back of my head. Now, the critical turning point for this project was in a bar in Sydney, Australia, when I was at a conference over there. Some people were supposed to come and meet me for a drink, and they were late. And this was bad, because this means I had the 3 prerequisites for truly terrible ideas. I had internet, I had alcohol, and there was nobody around to stop me. And so I took out my laptop and I started writing a joke. I just wrote, it wasn't ever supposed to be a language. It was a comedy specification. It was a piece of funny writing about what would a language look like if we went through as many of the cliches and tropes of 80s heavy metal power ballads and tried to turn those into enough of a structured grammar to actually create a programming language from it. Now, to understand where Rockstar syntax comes from, I want you to imagine that Perl and Ruby and VBScript walk into a bar with Bon Jovi and Rat and Motley Crue, and 9 months later, one of them has a really weird-looking baby. So I started off with, all right, variables and assignment. Now, when you write code, you probably have lines of code in your programs that look like this. Int x equals 5, var my underscore string equals hello world, the message equals let's rock. So a couple of decisions. First of all, hey, dynamic typing means that we don't need int and var. We can get rid of those. JavaScript can do without semicolons, so Rockstar doesn't need them either. This is fine. Now I'm looking at the equals. I'm like, you don't hear the word equals in rock and roll very much, but you don't need it. Hey, x is 5. That's fine. My string is hello world. The message is let's rock. That works. And then I thought, well, I saw a talk that Douglas Crockford, the creator of JSON, did in 2016, where he was talking about all the ideas in computer science that are so terrifying we don't even talk about them. We just kind of nibble around the edges. And he asked that audience, he said, have you ever had that argument in your team about whether to use Pascal case or camel case or underscores or kebab case? And everyone's like, yes. And it's like, how long was the argument? You're like, I don't know, an hour, a year? We all want, it's a stupid argument because we all want the same thing. We want variable names that have more than one word in them. We want spaces in our variables. Now, when you're inventing a language in a bar, you can do anything you like. So I said, all right, Rockstar can have variables with spaces in them. Now, it's not a complete free-for-all because that would make it very difficult to build. Not that anyone is ever going to build this. You know, it's a joke in a bar. So I said, all right, simple variables, if you worked with Ruby or Python, they work just like they do that. Common variables have to have a prefix, which indicates what they belong to, and then proper variables take a capital letter so you can write programs that are songs, and the songs are about people. And then I hit a bit of a brick wall because I needed a way of initializing numeric variables so you could write programs like FizzBuzz, because if you can't write FizzBuzz, you can't pass the interview to be the Rockstar programmer job, right? And I'm like, well, 3, 5, 100, generally, you know, rock and roll goes a 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, and they don't go higher than that, or you're into jazz and prog metal. And so I thought, is there a way of expressing numeric literals without just putting digits in the code? And I thought, well, what if we took words, any word you like, and we count the number of letters in the word, and that gives you the numeric value of that digit. So ice is 3, and then I thought, well, hang on, there aren't any 0-letter words, and there's not a lot of 1-letter words. So what if we take it modulo 10? And so if you need a 0, you come up with a 10-letter, and if you need a 1, you can have an 11-letter word. And so I'd figured out this syntax for doing numeric literals, which I called poetic literals. Now, to be a proper programming language, you need a whole bunch of things. You need arithmetic expressions, you need logic, you need loops. Eventually, all these things would come into play. For arithmetic expressions, what I did is I just thought, well, how do people talk about calculation? You're like, oh, what's the total? Oh, it's the price with the tax. A with B, that's addition. It's A of B, the quantity of the product. We talk about the price without the tax. You talk about distance over time in physics, that's division. But this also means that in Rockstar, you can write arithmetic expressions like a girl with a dream. Eyes without a face, fear of the dark, the moon over the city are all valid arithmetic. Rock and roll has pronouns in it because they're a building block of natural language and they're a good way of making sentences that are about stuff. And so I thought, all right, if X is true, print it. Now, if any of you folks has worked with PowerShell or Perl, they have pronouns. They don't call them that. They're called like a syntactic variable or the last result or whatever. But they have a, if this thing is true, just print $_ or whatever it is. Until your dreams are nothing, whisper them, tear them down. You can figure the syntax from that, right? Now, you talk about functions. Let's say that we wanted to do modulus so we can do FizzBuzz. And if you say, right, how would you build modulus in a language that doesn't have modulus? You're like, well, all right, modulus will take a number and a divisor, and then while the number is greater than or equal to the divisor, we'll let the number be the number minus the divisor, so we'll do this repeated subtraction, and then when it's not greater than or equal anymore, it means we found the modulus, so then we can return it. Now, at this point, I made a mistake. I decided that in music, you generally have like an empty line at the end of a verse, end of a chorus. So I was going to use a blank line to end loops and a blank line to end functions. And this would go on to have consequences in later years. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because this syntax also means that you can write functions like midnight takes your heart and your soul. And while your heart is as high as your soul, you put your heart without your soul into your heart, and you give back your heart. Now, what happens next is I get enough of a joke spec to write FizzBuzz. I put it on GitHub. My friends show up. We go out and have a fun night out in Sydney. Before I did that, I went and I put it on social media. And the internet found it. And the internet got very excited. And it made the front page of Hacker News. And it made Boing Boing. And it made Reddit. And people were saying, this is pure genius. I would love to be a certified Rockstar developer. We'll hear more about that in a second. The docs are hilarious. Shut up and take my money. Now, for the record, I have been trying to take this person's money for 6 years now. There is no money. It is impossible to make money out of stupid programming languages based on Bon Jovi songs. Then I got an email from Classic Rock magazine, which is a serious music magazine in the UK that interviews Metallica and Scorpions and these kinds of bands. And they said, what's this Rockstar thing we're talking about? And so we did a little email interview, and they put that in Classic Rock. Now, I would love to go back in time to like my teenage self, and I'd like to say, kid, you're doing all right. One day you're going to be in Classic Rock magazine, and I would not tell them why. But then things get really weird, because within a couple of days, I put this parody spec up on a GitHub repository. Within a couple of days, people started filing issues on the joke. And some of them were just more jokes, but some of them were like questions about undefined behavior and semantics. And I was like, why does anybody care? And that's when I found out that people were implementing Rockstar. People were taking the joke that I made in the bar, and they were building implementations of it. Someone built one in Java. Someone built one in Rust. There was a Rockstar Python transpiler. Now, this is where things get kind of weird, because this was the language was attracting a lot of attention, and a lot of like esoteric language geeks were like, "Hey, this is fun," and it was going viral on social media. But I was also finding that people who had never been interested in programming, people who were like, "Oh, I can't program computers; it's too scary," they were finding Rockstar, and they were like, "Actually, this looks friendly," and they were starting to play with it. And we're getting people in the Discord forums and stuff asking for help, and there was this scenario that played out fairly frequently, which was that somebody would be like, hey, how do I play with this Rockstar thing? And somebody would be like, oh, you just need to install Scala. And they'd be like, what? And I'm like, Rockstar first and foremost is comedy. It doesn't matter how funny it is. I've never seen a joke so funny I would install Scala just to laugh at the joke. And I figured, basically the problem we had is we had two kinds of people. We had the people who can build ESOLang compilers for fun in a weekend, and we have the people who build beautiful and intuitive user experiences. And I love all of these people. They are wonderful. I'm glad they are out there. They are not the same people. They are very, very far away from each other. And I figured that if, people were interested in this stupid thing I had done, the very least I could do was make it work on a web page so they could just click a link and they could go and play with it. And so at the end of 2019, I took a bit of time out, and I built a Rockstar interpreter in JavaScript. Do not ever build an interpreter in JavaScript. If you can help it, don't build anything in JavaScript. Better languages are available. Now, one of the little jokes that had come out of the community was you had to pick a code name for your project. So the Rockstar Python transpiler was called Whitesnake because Python, and the Rust one was called Maiden because of Iron Maiden. And so JS is either JavaScript or it's Joe Satriani, the instrumental guitar player. And so Satriani was the JavaScript Rockstar interpreter. Now, almost all of the code in it was mine, but there was one lovely contribution that came in from the community. Somebody took every joke in the spec and turned it into a test. And the way they built the tests was the tests were language agnostic. And so you'd have a rock file, and you'd have a .rock.out file. So it didn't matter if you were using Python or Rust or .NET, whatever. If you ran that rock file and you got that output, it meant that the test had passed, which proved really, really useful. It also meant that if you went digging around the source code for the Satriani project, you would find file names in there, like the array assignment. We had array functions.rock and array functions.rock.out and array alike.rock. But then if you go digging a little deeper, you discover that if you go and have a look in queues, for example, we had pop rock. And we had, if you look in assignment, there is a function in there called let's rock. And the output for that is let's rock out. And it's little things like this that kind of reassure me that this is on the right track and it's going to do something important. And so I kind of kicked this thing into shape. I got all the tests passing, and I stuck it up on the internet. And in 2019, now at this point, I think we're finished. It's there. It's in JavaScript. Anyone who wants to can code with Rockstar.com. They can run it in a browser. It's maybe, like 100 people a month are looking at this thing. I can see the web analytics. I'm like, okay, that was fun. That's finished. Then later that year, Carnegie Mellon University, they run a programming competition called Pico CTF, like a capture the flag programming contest. And they decided to have a Rockstar round in there. And 42,000 people found Rockstar because of this competition, and they're trying to pass, these little rounds of tests and things, and I'm thinking, well, if I'd known 42,000 people were looking at it, maybe I wouldn't have built it in JavaScript. Then 2020, I did a talk at NDC London about esoteric programming and coding as art, and I talked a little bit about Rockstar at the end of that. And then lockdown happened, and everyone went home for a year, and that talk got 5 million views on YouTube. And at the end, it talks about Rockstar. That brought another load of people looking at it. I'm like, oh, if I'd known all these people were going to look at it, maybe I wouldn't have built it in JavaScript. Then the Massachusetts Institute of Technology decided they were going to use Rockstar. Now, MIT, they're the people who invented Ethernet and passwords and Lisp and functional programming and put people on the moon. And they also invented Roombas and blockchain, but you can't win them all, right? And they had used, now what they'd done, they'd gone through real artists like, Bob Marley and Janis Joplin, and they had written a program that would find lyrics from actual musicians that were lines of valid Rockstar, and they had assembled those lyrics into programs that their undergraduates had to run to get to the next round of their programming competition. And I'm thinking, if I'd known MIT was going to be looking at this, you see a pattern emerging. And then at the end of 2023, somebody called CCC037 solved every day of Advent of Code in Rockstar. Now, if you've done Advent of Code, it gets quite hard quite quickly. Like, there are some seriously gnarly computational space-time complexity problems. And this is a point where I'm like, this is not going to go away. Like the world needs a better version of Rockstar. But the other reason why the end of 2023 was significant, one, WebAssembly had got good. It was now possible that you could write code in any language you like, pretty much, and you could compile that code into something that will run in a browser, not transpile to JavaScript, like, TypeScript and CoffeeScript and Google Web Toolkit. The browser would actually run that code on a binary, on a virtual machine, the WebAssembly virtual runtime. But also, .NET 8 had come out, and .NET 8 had native compilation. And so this meant that for the first time ever, it was possible to write code in C# and have that C# program run on Linux, macOS, Windows, without needing .NET installed. You didn't need a runtime. You could spit out one binary file, and anybody can just download the binary for their computer. They can run the thing, and yeah, it works. And you could produce a WebAssembly binary from the same source code that meant I could write this thing once and run it on Windows, Linux, macOS, and the web from the same code base in C#. And I like C#. It's my happy place. So last summer, I was like, all right, well, I've got a JavaScript version. I might as well just port it over to C#. How difficult is that going to be? Are you familiar with the programmer's mantra? We choose to do these things not because they are easy, but because we thought they would be easy. My programmer's optimism thought it would take about a week to port the JavaScript thing across. It took 6 weeks. I was off by a factor of 6. But there wasn't a whole lot going on that summer anyway. Now, what I want to do now, I want to walk you through how the mechanism actually works. How do you turn Bon Jovi lyrics into an abstract syntax tree that you can then pull into an interpreter? You can run the thing, and it'll actually tell you what that program is it valid, and is it going to work? Now, at the heart of this thing, I did not build all of this by hand. I have built compilers by hand at university. It's kind of interesting. It gets quite tedious quite quickly. There's a thing called a parsing expression grammar. Who loves regular expressions? Now, I want you to imagine that you take a couple of regular expressions and you put some more regular expressions on top of those and wrap the whole lot in a couple more regular expressions, and then you hang a trench coat over it and say it's a parser. This is basically what a parsing expression grammar does. The library I used for this is written by a guy called John Geetson. Thank you, John. It's on GitHub. It's called Pegasus. And the way that a parsing expression grammar works is you make a rule. So we got a rule here. We have a rule called string. And this is the rule that is going to recognize strings in our Rockstar programming language. And this rule says, I want you to read the source code, and I want you to look for a pattern. I want you to look for a pattern that matches this. Now, in Rockstar, string literals are surrounded by double quotes, and you can have double quotes embedded within them. So this thing is going to match the empty string. It's going to match A. It's going to match the string hello world. So when you find that pattern, you run this little snippet of .NET code here. Now, this is where we hit the classic problem. Everybody who has ever built their own programming language hits this problem sooner or later. Rockstar has strings. .NET has strings. I do not want a new string because that's a .NET string, and that's not what I want. I need to recognize that sequence and emit a Rockstar string. And so I referred to the literature. I looked this up in compiler engineering books, and quite a lot of them are like, well, yeah, why don't you, in your language, you have a string expression and a decimal expression and a Boolean expression. And I'm like, I don't want to type all that. And so I'm like, well, maybe we can namespace it, and it's rockstar.engine.values.string every time. Or maybe we could use like a namespace alias, because C# has name aliases now, so you could have using rs string equals this. And then I thought, no. The problem is I'm looking in the wrong place. I'm looking in compiler textbooks when I should be looking at Motorhead albums. String. Or string, yeah. So sometimes Germans get up and walk out. They're like, this is not how we use language. It's like, it's not German, it's heavy metal. That is a heavy metal umlaut. The Rockstar type system consists of number, string, null, Boolean, array, and function. Now, on one hand, this was a really dumb idea because it turns out that Rider, Visual Studio, VS Code, macOS, and Windows do not entirely agree on how to encode files with variables containing these things. So it only completely clobbered the whole project 10, maybe 15 times of me trying to work out what went wrong. But once I'd got past that and I had the encodings rationalized across it, it turns out there's all kinds of things. Like I can have two methods called equals on the same object, and one of them is the .NET equals that overrides equality. The other one is the Rockstar equals, because a Rockstar equals returns a Rockstar Boolean. It's not true or false, it's truthy or not truthy, because that makes the language more fun to work with. And so instead of string, string. Another pattern, number. So a number says, hey, if you match this, now this is just a literal decimal. It does support them. You shouldn't use them, but you know, they're kind of there in case people want to put numbers in. If you match 1, 2, 3, or -1, or +4, 5, 6, then output a new number, and so this is the constructor that instantiates the code. Now, there's a whole bunch of these types. The code is all on GitHub if you want to go digging through it. Let me just show you a little snippet of what those value objects actually look like here. So the number class is, it takes a decimal value in the primary constructor, because under the hood, Rockstar numbers are all decimals, .NET decimals. It extends value of decimal, which is a generic base class. There's an I have a number interface for anything that can be a number. Strings can be a number, because how long is the string? Arrays can be a number, because they have a length. Boolean can be a number, because true is 1 and false is 0. Everything is enumerable. If you want to say for every x of 5, that'll give you 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this just gives you like a nice syntax, but you wrap all this up in lyrics, and it can look quite entertaining. We've got a static number 0. We've got a toString method. Now, this isn't a toString method. This is a toString method with a heavy metal umlaut, which is how you turn a Rockstar number into a Rockstar string. If you want to turn it into something you can print, you then have to turn the Rockstar string into a .NET string so you can pass it to the console. And then we've got this equality. Now, I used pattern matching expressions a lot because they are a lovely way of handling these kinds of scenarios. So if we say, hey, is that number equal to that other value? You're like, well, if that value is an array, then compare the array length. That's how this works. If that number is a Boolean, then, hey, if the Boolean is truthy, then make sure that this isn't 0. If that is an I have a number, compare the underlying decimal values. If it's a string, then we compare the empty string is 0 because JavaScript, and if it's not, then we're going to do a toString and see whether the string representations are the same, and anything else is false. So there's lots of these little snippets of code sprinkled around the place, which just coerce different values to be different types and spin things around like that. Now, the way that the language, or the way that the grammar for the language works, is you start at the bottom with a bunch of rules. So I got a rule called null. And in Rockstar, null can be the literal keyword null, or it can be nothing, or it can be nobody, or it can be gone. And there's empty, which is the empty string, which can be empty or silent. And then we have a rule that says, all right, well, a constant can be either null, in which case return the singleton null instance, or it can be empty, in which case return the singleton empty string instance. And then we start building these little tiny, if you imagine these are like the atoms, we build the atoms into molecules, so we've got a rule here called primary. And a primary is something that yields a value. It can be a string, a number, a constant, a variable lookup, or a function call. And then we get into arithmetic. So we got a rule here, times, this is multiplication. So we got the star, or we got times, or we got of. And then a product is the left-hand side times the right-hand side. And if you find that pattern, then you return a new binary operation with the multiplier, the left-hand side, and the right-hand side. Or a product can be a primary. Now, this is where I think things get absolutely wonderful, because you ever see those quizzes on Facebook, like what's 4 + 2 × 3 ÷ 6, and all the kids you went to school with argue about maths. Just like, you didn't care about maths when you were 12. What's changed in the intervening years? The way that operator associativity and precedence is handled in these kinds of languages is that the parser consumes things in the right order. It's built into the grammar of the language. So if we give the Rockstar parser an expression like 1 times 2 times 3 times 4, what it's going to do is going to say, right, start with the right. What's that? It's something times a primary. What's the thing on the left? Okay, start from the right. It's something times a primary. What's the thing on the left? Okay, start at the right. It's something multiplied by a primary. What's the thing on the left? Okay, cool. The thing on the left is now a primary, which means all of these speculative cases now suddenly collapse, and we get a series of binary expressions that associate and reduce in the correct order. So that's how associativity is handled. You don't have a rule somewhere that says that a multiply is more important than a plus. It's just wired into the precedence of the structure of the grammar. And so then we've got a sum. This is how do you add things? Well, a sum is either a sum plus or minus a product, or a sum is just a product, and then a comparison, less than, greater than, equal to, or it is just a sum. And then at the other end of the stack, we've got a Rockstar program. Consists of either an end of file, because an empty file is a valid Rockstar program, or it is a block followed by an end of block followed by a program, which could be the end of file. So you have these little self-referential recursive operations going all the way down. And what is a block? Well, a block is either a statement followed by an end of statement followed by a block, or it's just a statement on its own. And then a statement is input or output or function or loop or if or all of the other bits and pieces that make Rockstar into an actual full-featured programming language. And then inside the guts of the language, we had a look at number. We take a look at something like an output expression. So you want to print something to the console or send it to standard out. It takes an expression. So output here wraps an expression, and we say, all right, well, first of all, I want you to evaluate the thing that you're printing. So if we're like, print 5 plus 2, right, first we've got to work out what's 5 plus 2. And then it says, okay, take that value, do a toString with the umlaut to get the Rockstar string representation, but then you're going to need to do a .NET toString over the top of that to turn that into a .NET string. And then you can console.writeline it, and then return new value. Everything in Rockstar has a return type. Everything that is a statement is also an expression, so everything has a value. Now, the fun thing about building your own programming language is you get to fix all the horrible mistakes that all of the other people made when they invented their programming languages. So how many of you folks are familiar with JavaScript? Because, yeah, so what's 1 plus 1 in JavaScript? No, we're not going to the crazy stuff yet. That's like 5 lines down. 1 plus 1 is 2. True plus true is also 2. That is, of course, the string object, but then JavaScript suffers from a failure of imagination, because if you say what's JavaScript minus script, it says nan, not a number. Now, to me, that is obviously Java. Because why would it not be? So in Rockstar, I decided there were going to be no exceptions. There were going to be no invalid operations. Everything would return something. And so I was like, right, what do we think? What is Rockstar times 2? Rockstar. Very good. What's Rockstar times minus 1? Rat score. Well, if you multiply an array by like a matrix by minus 1, it inverts it. So I figure, all right, that's how you reverse strings. What's Rockstar times a half? Rock. What's Rockstar times minus a half? Rats. What about Rockstar minus star? Rock, yeah. What about Rockstar divided by R? Now, at this point, it gets to, this is clearly stupid, and no one would ever do it for real, but I remembered when I was a kid, like, learning how to do division in school, they'd be like, well, how many 2s are there in 6? And you'd be like, well, 2 and 2 and 2. So I'm like, how many R's are there in Rockstar? 2, which is fine, because now Rockstar divided by Jazz is clearly 0. But also it gives you a string search routine. Like if you divide a big string by a little string and you get 0, it means that the substring did not appear. So these little things that started out as daft ideas because I didn't want undefined behavior actually turned out to be useful in some scenarios. ABC times 1, 2, 3 at this point, I don't know. Why would you do this? So I decided that would just do like a kind of matrix permutation thing. But then I realized this means if you multiply AD times C, you get the string ACDC. Now, I mentioned a while ago that I'd used blank lines to indicate the ends of loops and the end of blocks and the ends of... And this turned out to be a mistake because a lot of the Rockstar programs that people were writing on the web, they had these little brackets, end loop, end if, end loop, because if you take the comments out, you've got 5 blank lines. And is it 5 or is it 4 or is it 6? You know, because it's very hard to see exactly how many there are. And if you get one too many, then something that should have been in your function ends up back in global scope. And if you get too few, you can end up with infinite loops and things. So what I needed was the sort of the rock and roll equivalent of this. I needed this thing that programmers are just like, yeah, dum 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 dum, or in schemes and Lisps, you filter out all of the closing parentheses. I needed something that you can repeat as many times as you like, and it just kind of blends into the background syntax of the program. Turns out, you can say, ooh yeah, baby, as much as you like, and no one's going to count them. You should just put those in. And so I created a new rule that says an end of block is either an end of line, because that still worked, or it could be yeah, or it could be baby. And then I thought, hang on, what if we use a thing, so this is known as a non-matching look-ahead. What it's going to do is it's going to eat the first O, and then it'll look to see if the next thing is also an O. And if it is, it'll close one block and keep looking for the next one. So if you say O, that ends 1 block. If you say ooh, ends 2 blocks. If you say ooh, that ends 3 blocks. Ooh, ends 4 blocks, and so on. Now, there were a couple of points in putting all of this together where I realized, like, you ever do the thing where you're like, right, I just need to figure out this one thing, and then suddenly you think, if I can't figure this out, then the whole project has been a waste of time, because without this little detail, it doesn't work. And I mentioned one of the reasons why I ported the whole thing to .NET was .NET WebAssembly running in a browser. By the way, this is not Blazor. Blazor is built on top of .NET WebAssembly, but it's its own thing. This is the WebAssembly layer, and then it's a different thing that sits directly on top of that. And so what happens when you go to the Rockstar website in a browser is the browser spins up a main JavaScript method, and then that thing spins up a background worker. This is really important because background workers in JavaScript, they run on a different thread, which means if your Rockstar program has an infinite loop in it, your browser doesn't crash, and you can hit the cancel button and you can fix the bug and go back and sort it out. And then that worker.js, so the foreground posts a message saying, hey, here's a Rockstar program, I want you to run it. The worker.js thing then passes that into the rockstar.wasm, which is a .NET wrapper that abstracts things like environment variables and input-output, and that then sends that across to the Rockstar engine, which is the same on every platform. So there's a subtly different environment wrapper. And then at some point in that program, it's going to try and write hello world. It's going to try and print something to the console. And I was like, well, hang on a second. That needs to come out over there. Like, we got a different computer running in a different thread on a different programming language on a different network with a different domain on a different platform. I don't know how to make that work. And so I did a little bit of digging, and I discovered that the people who built the WebAssembly interop in .NET, these are genius people. These are wonderful, amazing, brilliant people, because they created this. They created JS export, which I can say, look, I got this function here, and I want this .NET function to be runnable from the JavaScript thing that is hosting the WebAssembly, because there's a little JavaScript shim around it. And so I'm like, all right, and then I can inject an action. I can put a function into another function, and I can say, look, I am going to give you a function here, which is going to accept a function that accepts a string. And so I can take a JavaScript method like console.log or something else that is written on the client side, and I can just pass a reference to that through all of these abstraction layers right down to the bottom of the stack. And then the .NET code is just like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to calculate the environment, I'm going to calculate the result of the program, there's the value, and I can just wrap the whole thing up and pass that back. And effectively what it means is that as we bounce through these different layers of marshalling and abstraction, there is this kind of golden thread that leads us back out of the labyrinth. And so when we get back into our background worker.js, I can just say, hey, post this message, send that over there, and boom, that's going to then come and pop out on the screen so you can actually run the thing. Now, I just want to wrap up today by telling you about one feature which I was very, very keen to get into the new version of Rockstar, which is a feature that I call ninja strings. Because just like real ninjas, they are awesome, and you cannot see them coming. Because I wanted to be able to do something like the night is silent, so this is going to implement silent as a keyword for the empty string. So now we've got an empty string. And then I have a thing for if you rock a string with a number, what it's going to do is take the number, turn it into its Unicode character code point, and append it to the string. So if we rock the night with 65, we get an A. And then if we rock the night with 67, 47, 68, 67, we get AC/DC come out of that. And then I had this idea, like I could combine this syntax with the poetic literal syntax that we talked about earlier. And so we could write programs that look like, now, at this point, I'm thinking maybe we want to do a little bit of mob programming, right? Just to kind of start the day off and get noise complaints from the next room. You folks up for that? And I'll tell you what, I have some certified Rockstar developer stickers, which you can't have unless you're a programmer, but you can become a programmer just by singing along. So the way this works is when I sing the line, your love, you're all going to sing back to me, your love. You ready? Your love, your love. Beautiful. My dreams hold diamond nightmares. Salvation holds the sea. The night holds silent echoes. Your love is meaningless to me. Rock my dreams like a love-struck smile. Rock my dreams with your love. Rock the night like a heartbreak missile. Rock the night with your love. Beautiful. Give yourselves a little round of applause for that. Now, if you want to know what that program does, that is the demo on the homepage at codewithrockstar.com. So you can get your phone out and you can scan that QR code and you can run it right now. But we'll do a quick code review. We're just going to walk through the code. We got a couple of minutes left. So we've got my dreams hold diamond nightmares. Is anybody really good at ASCII? Because we've got a 7 and a 10-letter word, so that gives us a 70. The C, that's a 3 and a 3, so we got a 33. Silent echoes, we got a 66. Meaningless to me, that's 122. Well, 1122, but you know how it works. Love struck smile is a 105. We got a 122, 122. We got a 117. 122, 122. And if you add together the ASCII values of those, that is how you construct the string fizzbuzz in idiomatic Rockstar. Folks, we are going to wrap it up there and take a couple of minutes for questions. I have a mailing list, by the way. I used to do social media. Hey, follow me on this. No, follow me on LinkedIn. No, follow me on Blue Sky. No, follow me on Mastodon. No, I don't care. Social media is a massive pile of crap. I got a mailing list. I'll send you email when fun stuff happens and I won't sell it. That's the deal. Folks, are there any questions? Or have we achieved the silence of complete enlightenment? Or is everyone just shell-shocked? Like, he made us sing. We went to a conference and the man made us sing. Cool. All right, folks, thank you so much for coming along. Come and grab me, rather than, I got a couple of stickers down here, so come and say hello if you want to grab a Rockstar sticker for your laptop. I will be on the party stage tomorrow night with the rest of the line breakers, well, the ones who made it anyway. We will be playing with a slightly diminished crowd, so I'm off back to my hotel now to mix bass guitar into all of our backing videos. Have a fantastic time the rest of the conference. Thanks so much for coming. See you around.